Well, what is up, Eastern Hills Online? We are so glad that you're here. We are live for our studio show. My name is Anthony. This is Sonia, and it is Candy Palooza here at Eastern Hills. Hence the reason why we are dressed like this.
I mean, you're looking pretty good there, Anthony.
I'm looking pretty ridiculous, actually. So we are so glad you're here, and just want you to know, right, like that we don't take ourselves too seriously, which is very obvious with my costume here this morning. Sonia, you're a little more refined, which I appreciate that very much. But this is a fun day here at Eastern Hills, fun weekend, and so glad for you to be a part. So we are live with you. We're going to be live with you for the next little while before we send it back into the auditorium to catch Kelsey as we wrap up our series called Haunted House, which has just been a great series. But we want to have some interaction with you. We want to have a little bit of a good time. And so we have got a question for you that should be in the chat.
I'm going to drop it in right now.
Absolutely. So check that out and let us know all about that in the chat. The question is this. Obviously, it's Halloween today.
Yep.
We're talking about pumpkins and all of the things. Are you a pumpkin carver or are you a pumpkin painter? Pumpkin carver or pumpkin painter? Let us know in the chat, and we want to hear all about it. Sonia, what are you? Pumpkin carver or pumpkin painter?
You know what? If I had to choose one, I guess I would say a painter, although I haven't probably painted pumpkins a lot in general, but pumpkin carving is something I could just skip right over. It's gross. It's a mess.
Right?
It's all of that. The kids love it. It's super fun. I actually really enjoy when, my mom or the grandparents want to help the kids with pumpkin carving, so I can just kind of bypass that whole thing.
For sure. So you're not necessarily a painter, you're just not a carver.
Yeah, right? I love pumpkins. I like to have them around to, decorate, put on the front porch, make things look cute, but the goo and the mess and it's just a lot.
I'll say for me, like, I get it, the goo and the mess, like, I'm not a big fan of that, but part of it just doesn't feel like Halloween without kind of the goo and the mess, right?
Yes,
like, and the smell of the
tradition
innards, right? So we are carvers, not necessarily great carvers, like I'm the triangle and the square and that sort of thing. But
do you have like special tools that you use to carve?
Like our girls like did that, right, with the small knives and the big knives. And I'm just give me a knife. I'm just gonna do it in 10 minutes and be done.
Like
right?
Triangle eyes and mouth. Like you just
need.
real simple.
Real simple. Put a candle in it. Call it good.
Yeah.
And then in 2 days, it's all shriveled up, and it's like, what was the point of that anyway? But
that's kind of fun, right?
Happy Halloween, right? So we are here for Candy Palooza. So glad that you're a part, and so we want to hear all about it. Are you a pumpkin carver, a pumpkin painter, or maybe neither? And let us know in the chat, and we want to hear from you. We asked our staff earlier, even this morning, for some answers. So we've got some of those to share, and we'll do that here in just a little bit as well. But we are glad that you're here. If you're new,
if you're new, hey, this is what we'd love for you to do. We'd love to drop you to drop it right here in the chat. We're gonna text new. We're gonna put that right there for you, so you can just take a look. We'd love for you to be able just to interact with us. We'd love to be able to get connected with you here at Eastern Hills. So it's super fun, and we're glad that you're here.
Yeah, and when they text that word, what are we gonna do? Get in touch with them and let them
We're
know.
gonna get in touch with you. We're gonna help you get connected and find your next steps here at Eastern Hills. And we're really excited, that we have the chance just to connect with you here online. So any more? Let's see. We got any of the pumpkin carving or painting?
Yeah, so Phil chimed in. Phil, our lead pastor, said carving. I'm not super good at it, but it's fun to see other people who are. That's fair.
Yeah, that's good.
Right, with the fancy things. Ben, our care pastor, said, I'm not great at either, but can follow a stencil drawing to carve. So, yeah, that makes sense, right? Like, put the stencil on there and carve it right up. That's good.
looks like Liz is on my page. Liz here,
decorating.
She also just likes them for decoration. And
absolutely.
Doing some of that. And it's kind of fun. I don't know if you've seen this lately where people are getting really creative, like getting drills out.
Oh.
Right? Like you can get a drill and drill like polka dots all over your pumpkin or do different things. So I think there's a whole art form that people are really kind of getting into.
Power tools.
Yeah.
It's good. Like, just don't get a sawzall. Then you're having just a big mess of pumpkin mush. Kelsey, who's actually speaking today, she said, I like both. And I don't understand this. So she says one comes with a snack after hours of hard work, though. Like, she's not eating the guts of the pumpkin.
I'm guessing she means pumpkin seeds.
I hope that's what she means. Let's hope. Yeah, who knows? Kendall, though, actually, I think he misunderstood the question. He said eating. Anything pumpkin, bring it on. So he's all about eating pumpkin.
He's
stuff.
looking for the snacks.
The pumpkin pie.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that too. So that's good. Dustin, he simply says carving. Like we're not expanding on any of that. Just carving pumpkins. That's what he's all about. So keep them coming. Let us know in the chat. Are you a pumpkin carver? Are you a pumpkin painter? And we want to hear all about that. Maybe just let us know where you're listening in from. We'd love to just say hello and see what's going on in your neck of the woods. So we have got some things coming up here at Eastern Hills. All of the things that go on here and like details and like figuring out what's going on, you can find at ehills.org/weekend. It's really a one-stop shop for everything that's going on. And honestly, if you've not been there before, you should check it out. There's just a ton of resources that are in there for you to learn all about of the the events that are going on, but also just kind of resources throughout the weekend that we've mentioned. ehills.org/weekend. But one of the things that is going on is date night in. A lot of the times, right, married couples especially, they kind of have this intention of being going out on a date maybe once a week or once a month or something like that. But then inevitably what happens, right? Life gets in the way. And so we want to make that night easy for you. And so we've created this experience for you to have some childcare here in the building. And then also for you to learn some really good parenting and kind of relational items as it relates to kind of your relationship with your spouse. And so would love for you to be there, date night in. All of the details, ehills.org/weekend.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great night and a great chance just to have that getaway.
Absolutely, absolutely. So make yourself available for that. Check out all of the details, ehills.org/weekend.
Looks like we also got Rose. Rose said definitely carving even though it's messy.
Yes.
And Jackie, she says, hate carving, makes me gag, painting all the way.
All the way, yeah.
I think like that's like true of a lot of people. It's either like, I can do it or
but here's the real question for Jackie, right? Like what do her kids want to do, right? Like some of those things you just gotta kind of like grin and bear it, right? As a parent.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess you kind of, that's probably true. I think I probably carved a pumpkin for the first time with my kids,
right?
Because even growing up, there was no way I was going to stick my hand in that pumpkin. Gross and disgusting.
And I'm sure they had this when we were growing up, right? But they now have these tools, right, where you like scrape the side. For me, it was like growing up. It's just like reach your hand in there and all the best, kid, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad about the tools that we've got now.
And I do enjoy the pumpkin seeds afterwards too. That's a good snack. Do you guys roast pumpkin seeds?
We do, and we were talking earlier before we went live here that like we usually do it like either where it's like burned or it's mushy, right? We can't find that good
happy medium.
Right?
Yeah, we've gotten Kendall's got some good. My husband Kendall's got some good seasoning and good ways for us to be able to cook them. But same thing, we've burned ours more often than not.
And then you're just like, you don't want to waste them because it's like
Chewing.
This is like a one time a year thing that you got the pumpkin seeds, but you just kind of have to bear it and just do it. So let us know in the chat. Are you a pumpkin carver? Are you a pumpkin painter? And we want to hear your answers. And like I said, also just let us know if you're watching and what's going on and where you're joining from. We'd love to say hello and see what's going on in your world. So we are in the middle of our haunted house series. We're actually finishing it up here this week, and it's been so good, right? The first week we talked about fear and how, man, I think for all of us, this whole series has been for all of us, like just something that we really understand because it's just part of what goes on in our heads and our lives, and that's part of the kind of the concept of haunted house, right? All of these insular things that we don't necessarily let out into the open. So first week we talked about fear. Last week we talked about shame, and like holy moly, how good was that? And so the thought was religion says shame on you, but Jesus says shame on me. So Jesus takes our shame. And man, just so powerful. So I would just encourage you, if you missed the first two talks,
go back and watch them.
For sure. So worthwhile. What are we talking about
Kelsey this week is going to be talking with us a little bit about control. And I mean,
this will be an easy
this
one.
is easy or tough is the one to think about, right? I mean, I'm an Enneagram 1, and I mean, if I like things organized and life to kind of go as it's supposed to, control is something regardless, I think of our personalities, it's something that we all deal with in parenting, in life. How do we deal with that? She's going to kind of talk to us about when he leads, you can live. And so obviously just releasing that control to Jesus and what that looks like in life. So I think it's going to be a super challenging, I think, and something that is applicable for all of us as we're wrapping up this series.
For sure. So like we said, go check out the first two messages if you missed those about fear and shame. And then Kelsey this week is up with control, and just a really, really great series. Hopefully it's been impactful for you, as impactful as it's been for me. So, hey, Sonia, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
What do you call an Irish pumpkin?
I don't know.
Jack-o'-lantern.
Oh,
Get it with
here
the
we go.
O?
Here
Yeah.
we go.
Jack-o'-lantern. Yeah, that's good.
You're like all in here for
That's right.
Halloween. We got costumes.
Yeah, so we're
carving.
it's Candy
and now,
Palooza this
and now
week.
jokes.
Let's go. Like, I got it all. I'm ready for it. I'm here for it. It's gonna be a great weekend. You know, we had some folks join us last night in person. It was a great time, and we've got so much candy, right?
We have so much candy here. So if you're still looking to get some candy, you come to this 11 o'clock service in person. We've got some for you and your kids.
Absolutely. We've got some bounce houses in the lobby. We've got other treats.
Lots of
fun. If you want to come after the service, after you watch Kelsey, come do that, or after our 11 o'clock. Man, it's just a great time here. Bring your costume, wear your costume, and you'll go away with lots of candy.
Okay, so Anthony, I got one for you here. How do you repair a jack-o'-lantern?
I don't know.
Buy a pumpkin patch.
Hey, with a patch. See what she did there? That's good. That's good. Yeah. Hey, what did the trick-or-treaters get when they told jokes on trick-or-treat night? What'd they get?
I don't know.
Snickers.
Oh,
yeah. These are good ones, right? Let's go. Yeah, maybe let us know about a dad joke, a Halloween dad joke, and we will share that with folks here. But so glad that you've joined us for Candy Palooza. Obviously, we're not taking ourselves too seriously up here. I've got a whoopee cushion costume on, so there's saw so many costumes downstairs.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
I didn't have to go too far to look for my costume. My kids play baseball, so that was I just went to the room next door and
that's right.
Saw what I could find. They probably don't
You've even got the sleeve.
Check this out. It's like this makes you look real cool as a baseball player. It's a special.
Does it help
Evo
physically?
Shield. I don't think it really does.
It's just for show.
I think it's just for show.
Your boys.
The gold chain.
Oh, I didn't notice the chain.
Yeah. We're trying to go.
That's good.
All in here.
You're legit. Yeah. During the World Series, Astros won last night, and so maybe that makes you happy. Maybe that doesn't. But it seems like unless you're living in Houston, you're rooting for the the Braves this World Series. So that's another thing going on this time of year.
I do feel like that's kind of a memory that I have growing up. That the World Series, right, always around Halloween and all of that.
Right.
I remember we used to have parties at Skate City for Halloween growing up, and I remember people sitting and listening to the game while we were at Skate City. Yeah,
sure.
Because that was kind of a tradition around
right.
then.
And then if you're anywhere in Denver, like you woke up this morning and it is cold. It's a little gloomy, right? Like it's not Halloween in Denver unless it is freezing cold, right?
And you can be so excited about your costume, and then you got to try and figure out your winter coat over it.
Yeah.
So it's a whole thing.
It's crazy. Hey,
hopefully you stay warm tonight.
For sure. Hey, I've got a question for you. What do you call a skeleton that won't work? Lazy bones.
Oh,
see skeleton with the bones. Yeah, it's awesome. So
super fun.
Hey, we're so glad that you've joined us here for our studio show. We're gonna be back with you after Kelsey has her talk, and we want to for you to stick around to be with us there. But man, it's just been a great morning hanging out with you. And like we said, we've got so many things going on here. We'd love for you to join us and make yourself available for the things that are going on. ehills.org/weekend. Check all of that out. But we're ready for a great talk from Kelsey. So Sonia and I, we're going to be back with you at the end with some final thoughts. So stick around for that. But for now, here's Kelsey as she wraps up our series. And welcome to the third and final weekend of Haunted House.
Hello, welcome to our final week of Haunted House, where we've been talking for the last several weeks about what keeps us trapped in our life, what keeps us haunted and from engaging in what we were designed to do and really living life fully. So the last 2 weeks we talked about, fear and shame. Not topics that we love to talk about, but we know they keep us from truly living out who we are. Today we're going to look at what it looks like to take control of those areas of our life and begin to overly take control and miss out on what God has for us. Before we jump too far into that, though, I just want to go to God and just center our hearts on Him. Will you pray with me? God, thank you. Thank you for being a good God, being a faithful God, being a God who sees us right here, right now, and loves us regardless of what we walked in here with. Thank you for being a God who isn't afraid. Thank you for being a God who isn't ashamed, but instead a God who seeks after us constantly. Today, God, will you help us learn to trust you. Speak to us, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen. So when it comes to haunted houses, I like them, but I don't hate them or love them. Like, I'm just kind of ambiguous about them, right? I went to a couple as I grew in my teen years and they were fine. Like, things jump at you and you're like, and it's great, right? I prefer to scare people than to be scared by people. So eventually I started making haunted houses in my college. It was epic. And also, I'm sorry to all of the people that I made cry, but also I'm not sorry because it means I did my job well. But I'm not super into haunted houses, partially because growing up, there was this house that I went to regularly that felt maybe not haunted, but definitely left me a little on edge as a human. You see, I love my grandparents. My grandparents, amazing. Like, going to grandma and grandpa's was one of the best experiences of my childhood. But their house scared me a little bit. Now, let me just paint a little bit of a picture for you. They lived in Fallbrook, which is just outside of San Diego in California, and legitimately might be the most beautiful piece of land in the world. Like, just gorgeous, right? You have everything you could possibly want right there, and it's peaceful and it's wonderful. And they lived on a little bit of acreage, and so they had avocado trees growing on one side, and then they had this like orchard on the other. They had apples and oranges and blood oranges, which is where I fell in love with them, and a kumquat tree, because why wouldn't you have a kumquat tree, right? Like, that's amazing. And then the best part, they had llamas. And I loved these llamas. I loved going to Nana and Papa's house and seeing all of this. I loved getting to swim in their lap pool and hang out with Shamu, the giant inflatable that lived in that pool. In my mind, it lived in that pool. I loved going to Nana and Papa's, except for their house scared me. Now, let me explain and paint this picture for you. So you walk into their house and they have this cool little entryway. And then the first thing you walk into is my grandparents' room on the right-hand side. And they're very clean, tidy humans. And so they left all the doors to all the rooms open to be like, look at how clean my room is. I close all my doors because I'm like, please don't look at how not clean my room is. But they left the doors wide open. And this would be great, except for as you walk into their room, the one wall is all windows. Which again, sounds great. You can look over their property, see all the trees. If you look far enough, you can see the llamas down below. And that's how they designed it. The problem for me as a child is I remember one night staying the night in their bedroom and I could not sleep. I got in my sleeping bag and I put my head on the pillow, and then all of a sudden the thought came to my mind, I'm gonna turn around and in these massive windows are gonna be eyeballs staring at me. Now, some of you have that fear normally, so I'm sorry for bringing this up right now, but they didn't have blinds because they lived in the middle of nowhere. And so I just thought, I'm gonna turn around and there's gonna be a person watching me. And I just could not sleep. That entire week, I was a mess. And from then on, I struggled to just even walk into their house. I'd walk in the front door and turn sideways and go past their room because I didn't even wanna be in there because it scared me so badly. But it wasn't the only room that was off limits to me. Just down the way, just a little bit, was living room number 2. Yes, they had 2 living rooms. Okay, the first living room was off the kitchen, amazing. There was this couch that is still to this day my favorite couch ever, and I can picture my grandpa sitting on it with his newspaper. There was a dollhouse in the corner that I used to play with, and it always smelled like coffee. And I can just hear the witty banter between my mom and her sisters. And that room was filled with love and joyful memories. But then there was living room number 2 that I thought if I just looked at it wrong or breathed wrong, I'd ruin it because it was perfect. Every magazine was placed perfectly. Every couch had its exact spot. And oh my goodness, if I sit in it and leave a crease, I might ruin it. So I just never went in there. I don't think anyone told me I wasn't allowed to be in there. I just felt like I was going to ruin it just by being in it. I never felt good enough for this room. So when I went to Grandma and Grandpa's house, I would come in and I would just avoid the right half of their house. And this sounds ridiculous and kind of cute for a small child, right? But as adults, how often do we do this too? We just avoid entire aspects of our life because they're riddled with fear or with shame. We have rooms in our own lives and how we conduct ourselves that are so filled with fear that we just go, I don't want to look at this. Or so filled with shame, we never think we're going to be good enough, so we just don't look at it and we pretend. And we're walking around living half lives. We're missing out. So what do? We look at these 2 things and we start to control everything. Those fears that are in our lives, we start to control where we do and do not go, who we do and do not talk to. I don't want to go to that neighborhood. I'll stick to this neighborhood. I'll go to this grocery store and not this one. We begin to create control situations so that we don't have to be afraid, so we can continue to just avoid this area of fear in our lives. Or when it comes to shame, we just don't want to think about those aspects of who we are. And so we're very careful to control what people do and do not see. We're careful to say the right thing and look like our lives are together. We're trying so hard to make sure nobody asks the exact right question to get too close to our hearts. And so we control our relationships and our friends and our conversations. And over and over and over again, in order to avoid these pieces of who we are, we just control. We just buckle down and try harder. We do more. And it begs the question, are you tired yet? Are you tired yet? Are you feeling overwhelmed by constantly having to control every aspect of who you are? Are you tired of trying to wake up every morning and make sure everything's exactly the way that it is so that nobody will look too close at those rooms in your life that are messy, the haunted aspects of who you are? I think for a lot of us, control may feel like it's good, but it's actually robbing us of living a life that is fulfilling and joy-filled. And we're not designed to work that way. The good news is, while we may go and grab that control and want that control so desperately for ourselves, there is a resolution to this. There is a way to kind of counteract this and find some of that energy again, but it means we have to include God in our picture. And truthfully, what we're gonna come to discover is that when He leads, you can live. When God's in control and is leading your life, you now have the freedom to live, not hiding aspects of yourself, but actually engaging in the world around you, participating in what's actually happening right in front of you. You'll have a chance to breathe and to be a little less tired every morning. Throughout this series, we've been looking at different Psalms and the life of David, and David kind of pouring his heart out about different situations he's walking through. And so we see David in this particular moment. He's battling this guy named Saul. Now, David, when he was young, was told, hey, you're gonna be king one day, which sounds awesome. The problem is there is a king and his name is Saul. And Saul is looking at this and is beginning to be filled with fear of this guy's trying to take over. People like him more than they like me. Fear begins to take over, and so he starts controlling. Shame starts to take over because his reign has not been so smooth. He's been doing some things he knows he shouldn't be doing. And so that shame is bubbling up. So what does he do? He takes control. And that all starts to come out at David. Multiple times we see David running for his life from Saul. And so this is one of those moments. Saul begins to control and David has to run and leave his hometown. And he goes to this town nearby, and this town happens to be a Philistine town. Now, the Philistines were kind of their arch nemesis. Like, this was not the place you want to go when you're struggling. And yet he goes there and kind of tries to hide out for a little bit. The problem is he's decently recognizable as a human. And so they see him and they go, hey, we need to tell someone. So they go to their king in this town and they say, hey, David's over there. He's the guy that's really powerful, like more powerful than Saul. We need to do something about it. So the king there goes to figure out if this is in fact David, the one they've heard about. Because if it is, he's considered a spy and they're gonna have to kill him. So the king goes to find David, and David in this moment is standing at like the gates of the city, and he changes his behavior. The way it's described by the king is he begins to act mad. He begins to foam at the mouth and get a little bit weird in that moment. And we don't entirely know why he does this. We don't know if this is the right thing to do in this moment, but ultimately the king goes, we're good. You're good. And leaves him alone, which is fair, right? You're not gonna wanna take this guy on in this moment. And so David, later on in his life, begins to reflect on this moment where he was chased out of his hometown and had to take refuge in a town he shouldn't be in. This moment where he had to change his behavior in order to avoid being killed. And he's reflecting back on this moment. And instead of thinking about how awesome he was, he recognizes that God was leading his life the whole time, that God was in control, that God was faithful to him. And he begins to shift his thinking and recognize how good God is at leading and how maybe not so good we are. So out of that, we begin to see him share with us how we can give God control in our lives, how we can change the narrative in how we behave so that we don't continue to control, but we continue to let God lead. And the first thing he does is praise. Praise. Praise is this idea of lifting up someone of high honor, of giving them glory that only they deserve, deciding positionally, you're in control, you're in charge. Praise is a way of raising somebody else up. And for David, he knew God deserved that position. God was allowed to take that position in his life. In fact, he says it this way in Psalm 34, starting in verse 1. It says, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. His praise is to say exalt and magnify and bless and boast and praise and to raise up God. He says all of this glory is only to God because God is deserving of that. The crazy thing, the thing that just gets me every time though is he says his praise shall continually be in my mouth. Continually. That means it's not a decision based on a circumstance to praise God, but all the time. He's looking at a moment in his life where things were going poorly. He was being chased out of his town. His life was being threatened by multiple kings. And he looks at this moment and he praises God. Regardless of the situation, he praises God. When it's good, praise God. When it's bad, praise God. Why? Because he knows regardless of situation, God is ultimate. God is in charge. God is leading the way. And the beautiful thing is, towards the end of that, he starts to invite us, come and exalt his name with me. Join me in giving praise to God. I wonder, is praise our first response? Is praise our first response regardless of the circumstances in our own lives? I'm gonna guess that it's not, right? Because we're too busy maybe maintaining an image for ourselves or for our kids that we have to make sure they say the right thing, do the right thing. And so we're just too busy maintaining this image that we don't have time to praise. Or maybe praise isn't your first response because you're too busy building and buying and creating a reputation for yourself in the world that you don't have time to praise. Or maybe praise is not your first response because you started praising God because of how awesome he was, but then at some point in your life, things weren't as comfortable or convenient, and you went, well, it's not going well for me, I quit. And so you backed away because circumstance challenged your love for God. Or maybe praise is not your first response because you're ashamed of what you did last night or last week, and so you think you're not allowed to praise because you're not worth it. And so instead, you hide behind self-deprecating jokes and just kind of slink your way through life. Or maybe praise is not your first response because you're too busy trying to reach these unrealistic social media level expectations on your life, and just to hope that someone will notice you and you forgot that God already did. Or maybe you're like me and praise is not your first response because you think you have to do more before God will care. I haven't done enough for him yet. I gotta try harder. I gotta do more. I'm not worthy of that yet because I can give more. I just haven't given you enough yet, God. I have to be better at this. So you just don't even know if he'd hear those praise. Now here's the deal. There's a million reasons praise gets lost. There's a million reasons why it's not continually coming out of our mouths. But instead of spiraling in shame about the reasons we've stopped praising or never started? What if instead we just took the invitation David gave to exalt him today? What if this was less about guilt and shame for your past and more about right here, right now, honoring God above all else, positioning ourselves today and every day to praise him above all else? David didn't introduce shame, he introduced the glory of God. In fact, just a few verses later, he says it this way. He says, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good." He's convinced that if we just get a little bit of God in our life, we will know he is good and praise will pour out of us. He said, "Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him." Did you catch that? Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. Blessed is the person who, instead of controlling and controlling and controlling and trying to do more and trying to do better and hiding from half of our life, what if just for a moment you just took refuge? Things aren't better yet. You just sat in his presence and you allowed him to be your space of refuge. You allowed him to be this moment in your world. You sat with him. You see, God isn't asking for praise from people who are perfect. He's actually inviting you into a position of refuge where as we praise him, he also heals us. That position changes who we are, and he's inviting you to step into that space with him. Because we know that when he leads, you can live. When he's in charge, we can find that life again. When we sit in his refuge and wait for his guidance and we position ourselves in praise, we know we can find that life and that energy again. So if praise is the position where we humble ourselves and understand that God is above all, God is going to win, God is in charge and can do this better than we can, David then goes from praise to something else. His first response after he gives all glory to God is to pray. And this may sound like a super churchy thing, right? Like when you are in Sunday school and they ask you any question in Sunday school, the answer is always pray and read the Bible, right? Like that's, if you grew up in church, you knew that phrase pretty well and it came out almost every single time you went to Sunday school. For others of us, maybe you didn't go to church a ton, but prayer's always been this like ominous thing of like, do I have to have the right words? Like, how do I pray? What am I supposed to say? Am I gonna say the wrong words? And then it begins to feel almost like magic. Like, do we believe in that? Like, that seems a little weird. But for David, it's not this elaborate scheme. It's an act of going to God first. And not just because we have something we need, but because when we go to God first with something of our heart, it begins to align with God's heart. So pretty soon it's not just about what we want, but about what God wants for us. And so we can realign our lives with him. Prayer is a conversation with God that changes how we view our circumstance to see it the way he does. Prayer is vital and has to be the first response for us. In fact, he puts it this way in verse 4. He says, "I sought the Lord and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Those who look at him are radiant and their faces shall never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps those who fear him and delivers them." You see, he seeks after the Lord, and in doing so, he invites God into those spaces of his life that are those rooms of fear, that room of shame, and God can do some work in that space. We see God entering into David's life, and David is allowing God to change his heart. It's not just about changing a circumstance, it's about changing us. He moves towards God, even in uncertainty, even when David didn't get the answer he wanted. My guess is he didn't want to have to run from his hometown to this other town and then again be in danger, and yet he watched God change his heart to see what God could see. The thing is, I think prayer becomes a last resort for us, or at least third or fourth down the line. Instead, I think we turn to some other things first. Think about your own world. What do you turn to first? Is it your own strength? Is it just adding more to your bank account? Because at least you know how to do that, because what if one day something happens? So I'm just gonna focus on that, and you just turn to that really quickly. Or maybe you're having some issues at home, and so what do? You just go to work more, take on more projects, say yes to more things you shouldn't say yes to. Or maybe when things aren't going well, you go to that group of friends that you know will just answer back what you want to hear, and that gossip wheel continues, but nobody actually challenges you. Or maybe for some of us, when things aren't going well, our first turn is back to what we talked about last week, those aspects of our life that are shameful, those things we hide, the behaviors we don't talk about, the addictions that have been riddling our world for a long time. And we go back to them. The question is, are they working? Because it doesn't feel like it. We keep going back to those things, and yet it doesn't feel like they're doing what we need them to do. But think about it, right? We live in a world with first responders all the time, right? We have first responders, and we should honor them. They do some amazing work in our communities, right? If you break your leg or something happens, you call 911 and an ambulance come and the paramedics come. Or maybe your house is on fire, so you call 911 and the fire department shows up. Now imagine you have a fire in your house and you call 911 and a clown shows up. Not gonna help. Maybe, right? They have the cute little squirty thing. No, it's not gonna work. But how many of us keep going back to first responders that are not helpful for us and are actually just allowing our houses to continue to burn to the ground? Maybe it's time to turn to the very person who can rescue us, the very person who sees us and can save us. You see, God is the ultimate first responder. We need him daily, moment to moment. What if we prayed? What if we went to him? When we do that, we invite him to take leadership in our lives. And when he leads, you can live. He's the best first call. A couple weeks ago during fall break, I got a FaceTime call. Me and my co-leader, we lead our senior girls. We got a FaceTime call from one of our students who was on a trip with her family. And while she was on this trip, was involved in a boating accident, pretty serious boating accident. And so she called us and FaceTimed us from her hospital bed. Side note, I have not had many FaceTime calls from hospital beds. I don't particularly know if I want more of those, okay? So let me know before you call me, okay? So I get this phone call, and she's sitting in this bed and tells us this whole story of what happened to her. And in this moment, I'm overwhelmed. Like, this is a situation that I've never been in before. Like, how can I help in this situation? What do I need to do? And so we hang up the FaceTime call, and within moments, I am on my computer and I'm on my phone trying to figure out, she got airlifted from her houseboat to a hospital within an hour and a half airlifting flight of that lake in particular. So I'm like trying to draw a map to figure out which hospital she'd go to. That's about an hour and a half away, which I don't understand how to do anyway, because I don't know how far a helicopter can go in an hour and a half. But I'm like trying to figure this out, trying to figure out which hospital she could have gone to and which airport I should book a flight and just get out there. And then I'm like, Kelsey, that's ridiculous. I'm not gonna go out there in an airplane. I'll just rent a car and drive, because then by the time I'm close enough, I'll at least know which hospital she's at and I can go there. And so I'm like looking up cars, and I'm like, well, I can't get it till the morning, and my brother is getting married in like 2 days, so I need to like fly out in 2 days, so I'm probably not gonna make it there and back appropriately. Kelsey, you're being ridiculous. Just drive your car. We're not sure if it'll make it all the way there, but it's fine, because you could leave right now, which means you could make up several hours and be back in time to get on the airplane to go to your brother's wedding. And then at the very end of that, I said, what are you doing? What am I doing? I am literally a clown showing up at a burning house. I have no skills in this moment. I'm not a surgeon. I'm not a doctor. I don't understand how I can help. And they're not gonna let me into the hospital anyway. And it was in that moment that I recognized I was trying to save and rescue and fix. I was trying to take control in a situation I had zero business taking control in. How often do we do that? How often do we look at a situation, even if we can do something about it, we jump in before we even think? So I stopped and I prayed. And I didn't have the words, right? There's no magical prayer in this moment. In fact, I was stuck in this place of anger that this could be happening and sadness that she was hurting and her family was hurting. I was in this position of not knowing what to do. And so I had no words, and all I could say was, God, help. That's it. That's the only words that could come out of my mouth. And I kept saying it for the next 24 hours. I couldn't find the words, and I just kept repeating, God, help. And it didn't necessarily solve anything for me other than the position of my heart. And as my heart became more in line with what God wanted for me in this moment, I could breathe easier. And as I watched this student go through what she was going to go through the next couple of days, I began to recognize where God already was showing up. And let me just tell you, he didn't just show up, he showed off in the life of this student. She's alive. That's a miracle. You see, God is better at this than we are. And if I didn't align my heart, I would have missed watching what God could do in a situation where I could do nothing. Prayer is realigning ourselves with what God sees, what God knows. It puts him in the position of leadership. But it's not just praise where we position ourselves to give God glory, knowing we can't do it on our own. It's not just prayer where we realign our hearts with him. It's also the act of persevering. To persevere, to take that next step. But for David, when it comes to perseverance, it's not about just white knuckling or buckling down or just pushing through a situation. For David, it's about who you follow. Who you follow will directly reveal what persevering will look like for you. In fact, in the passage we're going to read, you're going to see the difference in who you're following and how that pans out for you. You're going to struggle. He says in verse 18, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous. Did you catch that? Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. He keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. Affliction will slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned. The Lord redeems the life of the servants. None of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. You see, we're going to face affliction. We're going to face difficulty. That's not in question. We're going to have moments where fear pops up and where shame pops up. The question is, if you're going to push through this situation, who are you following? And we see this stark contrast between David and Saul. We see David who says, I'm going to go wherever God leads, even if it means I have to get out of town for a little bit. And so he steps wherever God tells him to step. He goes where God is guiding him. But then there's Saul, who's trying so hard to be in control. He's following himself, his own understanding, his own power. And when he's doing that, he's controlling and manipulating the world around him. And ultimately, Saul is condemned. He becomes the villain of the story. He lives in our Bible as the one who got in the way of what God was doing. And David eventually would take over. How many of us have been following our own control and we're only recognizing that it's getting in the way of ourselves and the people around us? You see, for David, when it comes to persevering, it's stepping where God wants us to step. It's allowing God to take charge instead of ourselves. And when we do that, he promises something so much better. I don't know if you caught it, but the last verse, it says, none of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. Some of you I know, for years, you've been trying and trying and trying. You've been pushing and pushing and pushing. You've been controlling and controlling and controlling. And you've just been trying to create your world. And in doing so, you've made some mistakes that you don't think you're ever going to be forgiven of. You've done some things that leave you so ashamed. You're not sure that you're ever going to be worthy. But David says, none of you who take refuge in him will be condemned. That means at any point in your life, you have the opportunity to just take refuge, not whole, not fixed, not complete, not not working through all of your stuff first. He says, right now, take refuge. Refuge is not a room that is filled with, I got everything together. Refuge is filled with a bunch of people who are broken, who just need a space to sit. He says, if you come to that space, God will rescue you. And you can do that today. Regardless of what yesterday looked like, you can do that today. Because none of you who take refuge, who sit in the presence of God, will be condemned. You have a chance right here, right now, to say yes, to let God become the leader in your life, and to sit fractured and broken right now in front of him and go, God, take the lead. Because when he leads, you can live. When he leads, we find life again. My grandparents, a couple years into high school, moved to Northern California to be near me and my brothers, which I guess is sweet, right? They wanted to be near family. Okay, cool. But the problem is I loved their house and I missed their house. I loved being able to go to grandma and grandpa's and experience what their house was like. All I have now are these memories of going into the avocado trees with my brother, Kevin, and we'd climb all of these trees because they are the best climbing trees. Just trust me on that. The leaves make the best crunching sound. We had so much fun playing in those trees. I remember walking through the apple trees with my grandpa, and he taught me how to eat an apple with a paring knife as we would walk and just listen to the sounds of nature, the sounds that only God can create. To this day, I still eat apples with that paring knife. I understand it's a little dangerous. I remember the dirt pile that was next to the barn, that my grandparents would hand us shovels and would just let us create this dirt pile into anything our imagination could think of. And so one time we turned it into a spaceship because we were convinced we were gonna go to space. Then there was archery set up just around the corner where Kevin and I would go pretend that we were Legolas and go and shoot some bow and arrows and occasionally hit a target. I have fond memories of that house, but I also know that that house was where fear and shame were apparent. The cool thing is, at some point, those rooms of fear and shame were no longer rooms of fear and shame. You see, that first room, my grandparents' room that scared me as a child, they eventually got a keyboard in there. And so I would go and I'd play the keyboard, and it became actually a place of rest for me. What was fear became a space of healing. Then the living room that I thought I could never go into because I was never gonna be perfect enough for that room became the very place we'd celebrate Christmas every year. And there would be wrapping paper everywhere. You see, God took what was shame and turned it into something that was redeemable. There are parts of your life that are filled with shame and they're filled with fear right now, but instead of controlling those things, what if we opened those up to refuge? What if we invited God into those spaces of our heart and said, God, do your work to redeem the ugly parts of me, to redeem the fear that has taken hold? What if instead of this endless and relentless pursuit of control that actually just leads us to destruction, what if we took God up on the offer of refuge? What if we could watch him turn those moments into joy? What if we sought after the unending, unconditional, and truthfully undeserved love of God? He's inviting you into that space now. The question is, are you ready to take refuge in him? Let me pray with you. God, thank you. Thank you that you can take on our fear and our shame. Thank you that we don't have to control our worlds because you are leading and you are so much better at it than we are. God, today, will you help us hand those things to you? Will you help us trust you with all the parts of us, even the parts we've been hiding from ourselves? God, thank you for being the best first responder in our lives that we could ask for. Help us hand these things to you. In your name we pray.
Well, welcome back into our studio. So glad that you've joined us here, and glad that you've stuck around. And we just want to hear some closing thoughts from you as we wrapped up our series called Haunted House. Just
So
a super powerful series and another great talk here about control. And so you can drop your thoughts in the chat, and we'd love to share that with each other here. But as we wrap up, kind of control, Sandy, what are maybe one or two takeaways that you've got?
Yeah, a couple of things that I heard Kelsey say that just really resonated with me was thinking about in terms of prayer that, he is the best first call.
Right.
And I think a lot of times, right, when we're struggling with control, how often I will choose to try to solve for things myself or to not just surrender to what Jesus has for us. So I thought that was just super powerful and just a good reminder for us as we're going through hard things and struggling with the fear and the shame and the things that are in our lives. How do we?
Because what happens right when we go through those things, we want to then just take it all to ourselves and solve it by ourselves because we think we're the best at it, right? But at least I think I'm the best at it, right?
Right.
When in reality, it's God who's the best at it, and He's the one that can really take control, right? And the big statement, when He leads, you can live, right? A lot of the times we think when He leads, we're just stuck in this kind of ho-hum life, but that's really where true life comes from, right? And so how good is that reminder to us that, man, just give Him the control. Way easier said than done. I totally get that, right?
For sure.
But how much better could our lives be, right? If we gave God control, let Him be in control than us.
And I love that part at the end, even when she was using just the analogy of going back into that living room, and that's where they got to celebrate Christmas, allowing Jesus to be able to redeem those places and those, those hard times that He would invite Him in. It's just a really good picture.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like we mentioned at the top, if you missed any of these three messages in this series called Haunted House, go back and listen to them. They are well worth your watch and your listen, and hopefully they can impact your life in the way that they have for a lot of us here. So so glad that you joined us. We want to let you know about a few things going on around here at Eastern Hills. The first thing is date night.
Yeah, hey, we just want to remind you of date night. We've got that coming up here in November, and it's really, again, just going to be a great time for parents to work on their marriage and have that time of connection. It's going to be a cheap date in a sense too, right? To include it's going to be a great experience for your kids. They're going to be able to come and have fun too. They're going to have things for the kids and all of that. So it's going to be a great night. So go make sure you check out ehills.org/weekend. There's information there where you can register for that.
Absolutely. And last week we talked about Mountain of Mercy. We kicked off our Thanksgiving food drive, and it's just such a fun thing, right? Great time to be part of that. And so a few ways for you to get involved. The first one is to go shop. We've got a list of groceries and a gift card that you'll buy, and then you'll bring that back into the lobby at some point over the next kind of week or so. And we're just going to create this Mountain of Mercy, which is just so fun. The second thing is you can go serve. And so on November 13th, it's a Saturday. I think it's my favorite day of the year for us just to load up all the boxes and get those ready to go distributed to folks in need, and just a fun time for you to serve as a family, right? It's not, and there's no qualification. You just show up and you're just here ready to serve. So those are the first two. What's the third way that they can get
and the
involved?
last one is give. We've got a button right there too on ehills.org/weekend. If you click that Mountains of Mercy, if you want to give financially to Mountains of Mercy, or if it's easier for us to do the shopping for you, we're willing to do that too. So make sure you kind of click there. We're excited to see the food start to come in, and for us to be able to just really make an impact on our community and make our community know that we're for them and we're here for them in this season as well. So we're excited about this chance for us to be able to shop, serve, and give.
Absolutely. So make yourself available for that, and let's help lots of families make it a great Thanksgiving this year. And speaking of giving, all of the things that we do around here, from Candy Palooza, we're all dressed up in our costumes still and can't wait to get downstairs to have a little fun with that, and Date Night In and Mountain of Mercy, all is made possible because of the generosity of so many different people. So if you're part of that team that gives, thank you so much for that. If you want to join that team that gives, maybe one of those easy steps for you to take is to give to Mountain of Mercy, or if you just want to give to the general fund, however you give, thanks for investing truly to help everyone experience that Jesus makes life better. None of the stuff that we do around here at Eastern Hills can happen without that generosity.
Well, and it's reminding me too of something that I heard that happened this week. Anthony, I don't know if you heard this or not, but we have grilled cheese lunch that happens on Wednesdays, where kids from Cherokee Trail High School get the chance to walk up and have a free grilled cheese lunch And this past week, I think there was over 400 kids that came up. And so for us to be able to think about the chance that 400 students got the chance to set their foot inside of a church, for them to be able to feel loved and cared for, even by a grilled cheese sandwich, and be able to take that first step in knowing that Jesus makes life better. That was just super, super awesome, and if possible, because people are generous
100%,
here at Eastern Hills. So
100%.
thanks for being a part of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Sonia mentioned this a little bit too, but all of the things that are going on in Eastern Hills, good way to check that out, ehills.org/weekend. Tons of stuff, right?
All the things you need is right there.
Yeah, just so check that out and make sure you make yourself available to that. So we wrapped up Haunted House this week, and we are ready to kick off a new series next week, Hope for Exiles, right? And we find ourselves in this just cultural moment that feels almost impossible for some of us, right?
Yeah.
The political differences, the racial tension, the coronavirus, all of the things that feel like we're separating ourselves from one another, and we feel like we have no hope. But the truth of the matter is, right, that our hope really is not found in this world, right? It's found in a different kingdom, and that sounds different, that sounds weird, but it's true, right? And so we're going to learn all about that in our next series, Hope for Exiles, and really hoping and praying that you do find that hope, right, in a time that feels pretty darn hopeless. So can't wait for you to join us for that next weekend. But man, we've been so glad to have you over these last few minutes here, taking some time out of your weekend to join us. And we're going to be back with you next time, and can't wait for you to join us for that. But for Sonia, my name is Anthony. So glad that you joined us. Make it a great week. We'll see you back here again next time for Eastern Hills Online.